Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. The New York State Legislature got a D- in a state survey conducted by the Center for Public Integrity. Dr. Seymour Lachman has the needed credentials to tell us why. He's a former state senator, a professor, and dean emeritus of the Hugh L. Carey Institute for Government Reform at Wagner College. In his new book, Failed State, Dysfunction and Corruption in an American Statehouse, he explains it all in detail. He's my guest today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. It's a pleasure to be on this program with you.
Thank you. Before this book, what was it, 5, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, you wrote another book called Three Men in a Room. And then you wrote this. It hadn't changed, right? It got worse.
It's got much worse, which is why I wrote this. I was elected to the New York State Senate in 1996. I served 5 terms, and I wrote the book shortly afterwards. I think it was 1908.
2008.
2008, correct. And at that time, I noticed certain things that I didn't know about. I was very naive. But I used to teach. I was dean at CUNY at the time, and I taught courses on government. And I actually thought that the theory of government that I taught was the reality that took place in the New York State Senate. I was abused of that thought after a month, if not less, in the New York State Senate. One has to realize that the New York State Legislature, which used to be a beacon of light for other states, is now somewhat dark. It doesn't shed light. And why? And it's because of the near absolute power of the leadership that exists, that makes it one of the, if not the, worst and undemocratic legislators in the country.
I was in the city council. I was elected in 1989.
And you were one of the outstanding members of the city council.
Only because I objected the way you did. I mean, I was as naive as you were. I got into this body, and I was amazed at the control of the leadership and what you could do and what you couldn't do and what happened to you when you didn't do what the leader wanted. It always made me question the role of a speaker or of a leader, because that's where the corruption begins. So explain it.
Okay, there have been some changes, of course,
Well,
you
the
know,
council
with
has
the city
changed a lot.
council.
Totally.
The New York State Legislature has
no
not
changes.
changed. The subtitle
Excuse me
of-
for 1 minute. It changed because there was a group of people who worked on it for years, but they were committed to doing it.
And you were one of them.
I was one of them. But the other question is, it also changed because it's in New York City. Don't you think one of the things is that Albany is so far away and nobody really covers it? So
And Albany has, people say upstate, downstate, but downstate also means the city as well as the suburbs. Upstate goes from Albany to Buffalo, but the residents of Erie County don't look at Buffalo as being upstate in the middle. But it's more difficult to do things. It's reflected in this book. The situation has gotten much worse. Now, I'm not saying that the total government of New York State is one of the worst in the nation. The executive branch is fairly good. And it has a good governor at this point in Andrew Cuomo. If you look at Illinois, they've had 3 governors in jail in a generation. I mean, Louisiana used to have difficulties. The legislature is separate and different. Legislature is controlled by 3 men, and they have basically eliminated the democratic process that existed there in the 20th century. And how have they done that? Why have they done that? Why do the legislators go along with them? Now, what exists today and what existed when I was there in the state legislature a decade ago is the fact that the majority leader of the Senate and the Speaker of the Assembly do not allow any bill to go through without their approval. They don't allow any amendments. When you create a budget, they're key with the governor, 3 men in a room. But when it comes to the legislators, a half hour or an hour before voting takes place, in a telephone book size, no one is able to read it. No one is able to go over
Do
it.
they have budget hearings?
No, they have what is called hearings, but that occurs before the budget is completed.
I see. How do these people become leaders?
They become leaders because they play the game to reap the rewards. There is something called in the state legislature Lulus, which are stipends. And different people receive different stipends. The money for the Democrats for being a committee chair or a committee member is controlled by the man at the top. There's never been a woman at the top, unfortunately, Ronnie. Maybe it would change and be different. And when I was there, it was Joe Bruno in the Senate and Dean Scalos, who succeeded him. In the New York State Assembly, it was Shelley Silver for over a generation. They controlled the entire budget process.
So they make promises to the members.
Yes,
because they're elected by the members.
Right, and the members say, and the members know that if they go along with the leadership, they will secure large Lulus.
Do they ask for certain commitments from the speaker?
The leaders ask them to follow their leadership. Mm-hmm. And there's no democratic process. The leaders control the budget, they control redistricting, they control the what goes on in the assembly. I have never in my 5 terms in the Senate witnessed the Senate and the Assembly approve legislation that was not supported by the leader. He controls everything. I sat, even though the ranking Democrat on higher education and transportation, I was a member of the Finance Committee. I'll never forget the day when the session was extended, which cost people more money, that Governor Andrew Cuomo has put an end to. Budget is supposed to be adopted by April 1st. Session ends, I believe it's this week, the end of June. We were in session in August because we didn't have the budget. Finally, in the middle of August, in preparing the 2005 budget, we met as a finance committee. And the chair of the committee said, okay, guys, you have to approve this. Should have said guys and gals, but he said, guys, you have to approve this. And I said, why? We haven't even read it. He said, well, you'll have a half hour to read it. And it was over 1,000 pages. It was like a telephone directory. And he said, but the others won't have a chance. They'll approve it. I said, what are you talking about? That's crazy. How can legislators approve the budget for the state of New York if they haven't seen it? He said, well, you're 2 leaders and the governor. The 2 leaders, as a Democrat and in the Assembly and a Republican in the Senate, and the governor have approved it. That's all it takes for you to vote for it. We can't even have amendments.
Right.
It's yes or no.
And the leader, the speaker, also appoints you to the committees and appoints the committee chairs.
Right.
So it's a total concentration of power.
Right. The leader has complete control. In Congress and other state legislatures, they vote on leadership. But the leader also controls, or the 2 leaders control, who gets on what committees. Now, there's recently been a story in the media about how the Republicans and the Independent Democratic Caucus, which split off from the Democratic Party.
Appears to be ludicrous.
Yes, when Senator Jeff Kline could not become the Democratic leader of the conference about almost a decade ago, and formed this conference. Now, they claim that this is good for the state because compromises are made if they support the Republican for majority leader. But what isn't told is that they get more Lulus, they get more stipends. And this is costing the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars
It's more than that, because the stipend is considered with their pensions.
That's true.
So it adds
Exactly.
to the salary that they have and the pensions then that the state has to pay.
That's true.
Yeah.
And recently, what happened was the Republican majority leader, in order to continue having the support of the IDC, Independent Democratic Conference, gave them better Lulus. How did he do that?
And they weren't even committee chairs.
They weren't even committee chairs. But the counsel's office crossed out the position they had, whether it was vice chair or something else, and only the thing that remained was that they were chairs of committees that they were not. And this was sent to the state controller's office. Now, this is not only unethical, it should be illegal. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And that's what I'm talking about, that this takes place. And why does it take place? 5 Republicans in the Senate and 3 members of the New York, of the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, now have $10,000 or $20,000 more in stipends than they would ordinarily have.
And we have a Republican the majority leader in the state Senate.
Right. Now, what
And
it's
the
interesting.
Democrats have more members, right?
That is true. If the two came together. Now, the interesting thing was that the Majority Leaders Council, this is a precedent that we didn't start. And he said, this is a precedent that the Majority Leader, Dean Scalos, started 4 years ago. Now, Dean Scalos was recently convicted on
that's how he
many
got it set up.
charges.
Yeah.
And he did start it, but they're quoting somebody who was indicted, convicted, and has a jail sentence.
We
ahead of him.
haven't said that the 2 leaders, one of the Assembly and one of the State Senate, have both been convicted.
Right.
And
This
they're
is the first-
awaiting
right.
sentence where they have appeals.
Right. This
But
is the first time in the history
just
of New
happened,
York,
right.
and I have not ever heard a conviction of outside of Nebraska, which is unicameral legislature, of 2 leaders within a month or 2 of each other
It's really quite incredible.
on felony charges.
How many members in the last 10 years have been convicted?
All right. There,
Just-
let me compare it to when I was there.
Yeah.
Let's take the
I want
last
to be
20
able to
years.
talk about how we're going to change.
Okay, 1996 to 2006, and 2006 to 2016, 2 decades. Now, when I was there, I viewed certain procedures as being unethical, but they weren't illegal at that time. In the decade that I was in the state Senate, we had 2 people, that's between 96 and 2006, we had 2 people who were indicted on felony charges and convicted. One was an assistant majority leader. And in the last 10 years, the last decade, the number of people has grown in 10 years to over 15. And we don't even include 2 more state senators that have been indicted over the last month and are facing trials now.
We're going to run out of time, so we want to talk about what could happen. You list different things that should happen.
Right.
But I want to also say the basic responsibility lies with the voters.
Absolutely.
And not enough people vote. And not the parties are not really strong state parties.
Yes.
So people are either, I don't understand how people don't vote. I mean, millions of people have fought for the right to vote, and we don't vote. So members of the legislature are elected with very few votes, aren't they?
Yes.
Even in New York City, in a primary, you can win with like 4,000, 4,500 votes.
Presidential votes usually half the population, and statewide voting for governor and legislators, 1/3 of the population, and in a special election, only about 10% of the population show up, which is disgraceful.
So people should make demands that the party is stronger.
Absolutely.
And that there has to be.
But you know what?
Whole.
Many people, including my students, former students at CUNY and at Wagner, say, this can't be changed. It's so rotten.
It can be changed.
That's what I would tell them. It can be changed.
Absolutely.
But you know, Ronnie, you can't. It will not be changed if the leadership plays by the rules that are in effect today.
Right.
You can't change it that way. So how do you change it? Every 20 years, New York State has an opportunity to have a constitutional convention.
It appears on
It
the
appears
ballot.
on the ballot
Do you
this
want or don't?
November.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years ago, I wasn't sure
Right.
because I felt that maybe other extraneous things would come out at a convention that could be deleterious to society. And I said, let the legislature do it. And I say now on your program that the legislature will never do it because the leadership will never allow it to happen. And they have near absolute power. So we're faced with the situation that in order to bring reform about basic reform in the state legislature that affects people economically in the state of New York, you must have a constitutional convention. And look, my opinion's changed. Richard Ravich's opinion changed. Peter Goldmark, who was the budget director to Governor Carey and then president of the Rockefeller Foundation, his opinion has changed. There's no way out. And we have to protect the people of the state of New York. And eventually, when a constitutional convention takes place and the delegates, part-time delegates, are elected by them for a few months, that'll bring about change.
We need excitement and education so people know that this is most likely the most important thing for New Yorkers on the ballot.
Right. And people have to realize that the method of getting to a good or an end that services the people is as important as the end. I mean, Mussolini brought about good train service. The trains ran on time. But at the end of his life, the people that he was supposed to represent turned against him because the methods he used were destructive of the ends that he tried to achieve.
So there are organizations now of people who are meeting to consider
Absolutely.
how you do this.
And many of them are coming together. Of course, in New York City, you have the Brennan Center, you have in New York, and you also have the Carey Institute at Wagner College to reform government, and you have good government groups that have existed.
You're on the board of one of the groups. Do you know the name? I don't remember the name. That is meeting on a regular basis, I think. I know it's at Evan Davis's house and other places.
Yeah, Evan Davis has
used to be counsel to
plays
the
a very
government, right?
important role,
Right.
And he is trying to achieve a constitutional convention, and has written about it and spoken about it eloquently.
If you Google New York State Constitutional Convention or plans for New York State Constitutional Convention, you'll get up a couple of different organizations. I know Samuels has one, and there are others, and people should really...
Susan Lerner, Dick Dady has, there are a slew of them. There are about 10. And when I was still the dean of the Carey Institute at Wagner College, I tried bringing the different groups together. It's very important that we speak with one voice.
Right.
And I hope that this will occur in the fall of this year regarding a constitutional convention, which will appear on the ballot in November.
Right. And if you vote yes, then the next year you will have
Absolutely.
to be able to vote for
in
delegates.
In 2018.
Right, for delegates.
And there is no other way, in my opinion, Ronnie, to bring about permanent change.
Right. I think one of the way that the council, aside from the spirit of some people, was term limits.
Absolutely.
Interestingly enough, so it was almost the same thing. It was the only way you could really clean the place out, and elect new people. So along with that goes issues on ethics, of course.
Absolutely.
Campaign finance.
Absolutely.
What else?
Along with that, issues of redistricting.
Right.
And issues of how a legislature functions and who has the power of appointment. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, when she was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, wanted to have one of her colleagues become, I think, the number 3 person in the House hierarchy. She went before her Democratic conference, and they said no. And her reaction was, we'll work with the person that the majority of Democrats approve. That could never happen. It never could happen in the New York State Legislature because the leaders are considered kings with near absolute power.
So, and also it's how you organize things, that the members of a committee should elect the chair.
Absolutely.
And consideration should be given to who wants to be on what committee.
Right. And if you play ball with the leadership, then you have a much better chance of becoming a chair with a greater stipend and becoming eventually part of the leadership in your respective house, the Senate or the Assembly.
But the stipends should be set.
Absolutely.
The leader should not be able to decide who's going to get $5,000 and who's going to get $40,000.
Right. And also, it should be decided by the entire chamber as to which constituencies or what part of the city gets funding for certain projects, which should be constantly evaluated. Now, they're not evaluated. People get funds for community organizations that help them. And in the book, it's mentioned that Senate...
Are they called members' items?
They were called member items. That could be member items. It could be housekeeping. Other things now. They tried, sometimes to change the name, but the same thing occurs and reoccurs. Look, I was called into the majority leader's office, and I was shocked. About, I would say, in the 21st century, after I was there for about 6 years in the Senate, and I was asked by the leader, how much do you get in member items? And I responded, Joe, you know better than I do. What do I get in member items? You make the selection and give out the member items for everyone. He said, well, you get $139,000. How would you like to get $2 million to $2.5 million a year? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, all you have to do is vote for a Republican, for a majority leader. You can run as a Democrat and then caucus with the Republicans rather than the Democrats. And when I got up to leave, he got a call from, received a call from Governor Pataki. and I didn't want to hear the conversation. And he said, no, don't leave, sit down. The governor wants to talk to you. And the governor reiterated what the majority leader said, that your member items would increase exponentially, and your community will be well served with money, and you will never, ever lose a re-election, which is why 98% of the legislators in New York State are always re-elected.
We've come to the end, but you did not accept the offer.
I did not, as a matter of conscience, accept it. And one of my colleagues was waiting outside. He ran into the majority leader's office, and he accepted what I rejected. He's now convicted of a felony and serving a prison sentence.
So everybody.
Now, this was not a bribe.
Yeah.
It was an
deal.
offer to...
It was a deal.
A deal.
It was like Trump.
That's right.
And so this is all revealed in this very interesting and shocking book, Failed State. Please read the book and also vote yes for a constitutional convention, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
would say you're right on target.
Thank you, Seymour.
And it's a pleasure being on your program.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you
very
very
welcome.
much. We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.